Good morning.
Good morning.
We are thankful to be here this morning. Thankful to see those of you that are here. We know we've got several people that are traveling, and we still got folks that are not feeling well, and all the myriad of things that go on that make life life. I'm just thankful that we know that our Redeemer lives, and that because he lives, we can look forward to our days. And as Leah expressed, as we drove up on the lot, and wasn't a couple of vehicles here at that moment, and I said, well, not many folks here yet. And she observed quite wisely that it was going to be all right as long as the Lord was here, and that's very true. So we're very, very, very thankful. Very thankful that we come here with the hope and the anticipation that the Lord is here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I read the story the other day on the internet, and I thought it was kind of fitting for the new year, so I'm going to share it with y'all. A member of the church who previously had been attending service regularly stopped going. After a few weeks, the pastor decided to visit him. It was a chilly evening. The pastor found the man at home alone, sitting before a blazing fire. Guessing the reason for his pastor's visit, the man welcomed him in, led him to a comfortable chair in front of the fireplace, and waited. The pastor made himself at home but said nothing. In the gray silence, he contemplated the dance of the flames around the burning logs. After a few minutes, the pastor took the fire tongs, carefully picked up a brightly burning ember, and placed it to one side of the hearth alone, then sat back in his chair, still silent. The host watched all this in silent contemplation. As the one lone ember's flame flickered and diminished, there was a momentary glow, and then the fire was no more. Soon it was cold and dead. Not a word had been spoken since the initial greeting. The pastor glanced at his watch and realized it was time to leave. He slowly stood up, picked up the cold, dead ember, and placed it back in the middle of the fire. Immediately it began to glow, once more with the light and the warmth of the burning coals around it. As the pastor reached the door to leave, his host said with a tear running down his cheek, "Thank you so much for your visit, and especially for the fiery sermon. I will be back in church on Sunday." This new year, I pray that we all have a burning desire to follow the Lord, that we know when to speak and when to sit in silence. I want to read you Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. May we have this year the relationship, supply, rest, refreshment, healing, guidance, purpose, discipline, and hope that Psalms 23 tells us about.
I invite you to turn with us this morning to the 43rd chapter of the book of Isaiah. And while I think the 19th verse is going to be my focus, I'm going to back up just a little bit so that we can get a better view what exactly the Lord was speaking to them about, and I'll just kind of recap this. In the verses previous, he speaks of their deliverance from Babylon. He speaks of their deliverance from Egypt. He says in the 15th verse, I am the Lord, your Holy One, the Creator of Israel, your King. And if God would give us grace just to dwell on that, we could probably spend the rest of our days digging into all that he said in those simple words. I am the Lord. I am your Holy One. I am the Creator of Israel. I am your King. Thus saith the Lord, which maketh a way in the sea, and a path in the mighty waters, which bringeth forth the chariot and horse, the army and the power. They shall lie down together, they shall not rise. They are extinct. They are quenched as tallow, which simply refers to a tallow candle, if you will. Quenched as a candle flame. They've been snuffed out there. And there's one thing that we all recognize right about a candle flame. If you snuff it out, it has no power to restart itself. So what he's telling them here is that their adversaries were without power. When he delivered them, all that stood against them and all that chased after them were without power. He says, remember ye not the former things, neither consider the things of old. I don't think that God is telling us to forget our past blessings. I don't think he's telling us to forget our past experiences. But I do think we are being counseled here not to let our past experiences necessarily rule our present. There are things in my past that I'm thankful that I can remember, because it reminds me of how the hand of God has been merciful to me all of my days, regardless of whether or not I deserved that. And I will assure you that I did not. God has been far better to me than I have ever had any right to anticipate or expect, because that's who he is. And I am so very thankful that that's who he has been in my life. What we're being told here is not to not remember God's deliverance, but rather not to remember the bondage. Don't dwell on the things that you have been bound up in. Don't dwell on the things that have brought you sorrow, but rather dwell on God's deliverance granted unto you from those things, and in the midst of those things and through those things, and how that he made a path. You ever thought about making a path through water? Now we might make a path through the snow. We might walk back and forth between the yard and the pond enough that we make a path for folks to follow. But I doubt seriously that any of us have ever made a path through water. And yet, the God that we love and serve has told us just that he made a path through the water. He makes a path through the impossible. He makes a path for us through ways that we can't imagine, things that we can't see, ways that we can't comprehend. Yes, there's sorrow in this world. We've all experienced it. We've all been touched by it. We've been touched by it just in the last few hours. We've been touched by it. And we think back over this past year, and I'm sure every one of us can number many sorrows. But I realize that in the numbering of those sorrows, I have to also number the joy and the mercy and the peace and the grace that God has bestowed upon me, that I was not overwhelmed with those sorrows, that I was not overrun with those sorrows, that I was not overcome by them, that God made a path through the impassable and the impossible. And while those things still touch my heart, I cannot dwell upon them without dwelling upon the grace and the goodness and the mercy of God. Remember that ye not the former things, neither consider the things of old. Behold, I will do a new thing. Sometimes we're prone to wondering if there's contradiction in the Scripture, because Ecclesiastes said there's nothing new under the sun, and Isaiah said, speaking through the voice of God, that I'll do a new thing. Was somebody wrong? No. God was telling us that He would bless us to experience things that we hadn't experienced before. They're new in their experience, not new in God's power, not new in God's will, not new in God's purpose, simply new in our experiencing of them. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Sometimes we have to wait on the Lord, don't we? Sometimes we don't get our answer right when we want it, or right when we think it'd be best for us to have it. We get impatient. We grow weary sometimes in waiting. But sometimes we don't always have to wait. There are things that God does suddenly, that God does instantly, that God does in the moment. And in the moment of our greatest distresses, God says, I'll do a new thing. I'll give you a new experience. I was called on to preach both of my grandfather's funerals. They were wonderful and precious men. And in contemplating that before time, my humanity said, there's no way. I can't do this. I can't preach the funeral of the man that used to pull me up beside him in the swing, hanging out on that old poplar tree limb, and open up his little old change purse and fish me out a dime. Can't preach the funeral of the man that I enjoyed going trout fishing with so many times over the years. And in both of those times, when I stood, God did a new thing for me. And you might be tempted to say, well, if He gave me the grace to preach those funerals, it was the same thing. No, because it was a different experience with both of them. Because they were different men. Both of them were wonderful men, but they were different men, and it was a different experience with each of them. And to some extent, from my human standpoint, a different dread with each of them. But when I stood, God gave me those things that I thought was such a dread and made them precious. And gave me grace to speak of those things with joy and with wonder and with amazement again. And He did that instantly. And the things that we dread the most, God is instant in His grace and in His mercy. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall ye not know it? Now understand, He didn't say here, ye shall not know it. He said, shall ye not know it? It's a rhetorical question. God is saying to you, do you think I'm going to do this new thing and not cause you to be aware of it? Do you think that I'm not going to work this in your life and not allow you to see that it's my hand, not allow you to know that it's my love, not cause you to know that it's my grace that has done this in your life? I don't do these things to hide myself from you. I do them that you might see me more clearly. I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. I will make a way in the wilderness. You ever wandered in the wilderness? Now, I know we don't do it like our pioneer forefathers once did. But have you ever gone hunting and got so deep in the woods that you wasn't sure where you were? Wasn't no path. You wasn't exactly sure which way you left the truck. Maybe you wandered around 3 or 4 hours before you finally stumbled across something that was familiar, not because you'd already passed it 3 other times, but because it was actually on the way back to where you were going. It's nice when you journey into the wilderness for there to be a path to follow. Landmarks that you can identify. I will even make a way in the wilderness. How many times have you in your life found yourself absolutely lost? Maybe in your own thoughts, maybe in the struggles in your heart, maybe in a situation that you were facing that you had no idea which way to turn or which way to step or what it was you needed to do. And suddenly, there was a path before you that you knew was right, that you knew that this was, and sometimes it might be what the world will call counterintuitive. Sometimes it might look like, well, if I do that, it's not going to result in the result I want. But how many times did it come out to be the result you needed? The result you desired, even though you didn't know you desired it. I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the desert. I've never actually been in a desert, but I've seen pictures, watched a few documentaries, and do you know what's absolutely amazing to me? You let it come, one of those unusually odd big rains in the desert, and the water begins to run through these channels that it's run through before, and all of a sudden, that dead, lifeless, barren landscape is absolutely covered up in flowers and greenery and some of the most beautiful things I have ever laid my eyes on. And it's almost instantaneous. God says, I will make a way in the wilderness. I will make a way in your wilderness. And rivers in the desert. Now, the wonderful thing about rivers is that they flow. They cover a lot of territory. They carry a lot of things. Rivers in the desert. Now, and what is glorious about what the Lord does in this is that it benefits so many. The beasts of the field shall honor me, the dragons and the owls, because I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. The wild beast is going to honor me in that. The wild beast is going to receive benefit from that. Those that don't have the capacity to actually worship me as I have given you the capacity to worship me are going to benefit in this, and they are going to honor me in that they do benefit from it. But children, I want you to listen to this. Because he didn't do it for the wild beast, for the dragons and the owls. They're going to benefit from it, and they're going to honor him in that benefit. But why did he say he did this? To give drink to my people, my chosen. So you see, there are those around us that may benefit from the blessings that God bestows upon us. And I'm thankful for that, and I hope that there are many people that have benefited over the years from the blessings that God has bestowed upon me. But I don't need to lose sight of the fact that God made those ways, that he made those paths, that he sent those rivers so that I could drink. Many may have benefited. But that doesn't lessen the fact that he did it for me. When that big storm came and the disciples were terrified there in the ship, you remember, if you read the scripture, they weren't the only little ships. There were other little ships that were out there in that storm-tossed sea with them. stepped up in the bow of the ship that he and his disciples are in and rebuked the wind and the waves and said, "Peace, be still," and a great calm came upon the sea. Do you know every little boat out there benefited from that? The difference being this, that those that were in the boat where Jesus stood knew why it happened. They were not just thankful. I'm sure they were all thankful for the calm. But those that saw Jesus knew who to praise, who to give glory to, who to be thankful for. They knew that while they had all benefited, Jesus had done that for them. It wasn't that he didn't. It wasn't that the other little boats didn't matter. You see, sometimes people want to take the attitude, if I say that the Lord has blessed me in a thing, they want to think, well, if he didn't bless everybody with that, then it's not fair. And that I'm not saying, he didn't say that others don't matter. The key to this is for us to understand that the blessings that we have received aren't just a blanket thing. God sent that river for you. God made that path for you. It doesn't say that others won't benefit. It doesn't say that others will not honor God in it. The beast of the field was going to honor God in the things that he had done. But in our knowledge, in our understanding, in our hearts, we need to honor him because we understand that it's not just that he did it, but that he did it. So that we can drink. That he did it with us in mind. That he did it with his eye on us. A new thing. I hope that in this new year we are blessed often to see the new thing that God does in our lives from time to time. That we sing a song sometimes called New Grace. And now we know there's nothing new about God's grace per se. But we face situations sometimes that we haven't faced before. And in those situations we need grace for those things that we hadn't needed before. So to us it's new grace. Just like God does a new thing. This people have I formed for myself. They shall show forth my praise. You see, I fully believe that God has a covenant people in the world. Still to this day, that he will always have a covenant people in this world. That there will always be a remnant kept here that will show forth his praise because that's what he has formed us for. That's what he has made us to do. And if that sounds a little like absolutism to you, that's okay with me because I'm going to tell you something. I believe in an absolute God of absolute power who will absolutely bring his purposes to pass. So if that makes me an absoluter, then I are one. I don't believe in a God that wants to do things. I don't believe in a God that would like to do things. I don't believe in a God that would perform wonders in my life if I let him. He was performing wonders in my life before I had sense enough to let him. The fact that I have a life at all is a wonder that he performed, and I had no capacity to let him. Now he goes on in the rest of this chapter and describes our failure to worship him, our failure to honor him, our failure to be faithful to him. Well, that's kind of a downer. He's done all this. He's made us all these promises and everything. And then he tells us how poorly we performed. Thou hast not called upon me. Thou hast been, you've gotten tired. Thou hast been wearied. Can you think about that? God said, you got tired of You ever been guilty of being tired of God? I don't want to do it that way anymore. I don't want to go to church. I don't want to pray. I don't want to study my Bible. I don't want to be responsible. Tired. He goes on and describes all the things that he in the 24th verse, he says, thou hast made me to serve with thy sins. Thou hast wearied me with thy iniquities. God said, you think you're tired of me? But then he says, even I, am he that blotteth out thy transgressions for mine own sake, and will not remember thy sins. Put me in remembrance. Let us plead together. Declare thou that thou mayest be justified. God said, sit down and reason with me. Can you imagine the love? People say that we don't see a loving God in the Old Testament. I beg your pardon. Can you imagine the love that it takes for God to say to a people that have in essence in their behavior, I'm tired of God. I'm tired of serving. I'm tired of worship. I'm tired of praying. I'm tired of living a godly life. And still that God says, let's plead. And that word plead simply means to sit down and reason. He didn't say, I'm going to whip you in line. He didn't say, I'm going to beat you to death. He didn't say, I'm going to cut you off. He didn't say, I'm just going to make demands and you just going, this is one time, sometimes I learned as a child and later on as a parent, sometimes because I said so was reason enough. Sometimes it's the only reason I was going to get. But it was wonderful to reach an age where my dad could sit down and say, now this is what I expect of you, and this is why I expect it. If you've got a problem with that, let's talk about it. So we reached the point where we could sit down and plead together. Thy first father hath sinned, and thy teachers have transgressed against me. Thy first father. Who do you reckon he was talking about that? I suppose it was Adam. Thy first father hath sinned. Man sinned in the beginning, and those that have taught have transgressed against God. Therefore I have profaned the princes of the sanctuary, and have given Jacob to the curse, and Israel to reproaches. Man, we went from rivers and desert places to being rebuked and reproached, and I'm thankful that this line of thought, that we sometimes at chapters and verses think we've come to the end of something, don't we? I'm so thankful that this is not where this conversation ends. Yet now hear, O Jacob my servant, and Israel whom I have chosen, thus saith the Lord that made thee and formed thee from the womb, which will help thee. Fear not, O Jacob my servant, and thou Jeshurun whom I have chosen. For I will pour water upon him that is thirsty, and floods upon the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon thy seed, and my blessing upon thine offspring, and they shall spring up as among the grass, as willows by the water courses. God said, I'm not happy with all your transgressions. Put me in remembrance. Let's reason together. And yet hear my promise unto you. In spite of all of this that we have just come face to face with, in spite of running up against this hard truth that we're weary of God, and the fearful truth that we weary him with our transgressions, God said, yet here now, yet here, at this time, instantly, at this point, we have come face to face with some things, and God says, but still, you're my people. My love for you does not fail. I am the Lord which will help thee. I will pour water upon him that is thirsty. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I don't feel thirst like I once did. When I was a little knot-headed hillbilly boy throwing hay bales. All day long in the hot sun, breathing in that old hay dust, and you know, I understood what thirst was. Mouth gets so dry, your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth, and you go to say something that come out a croak, and all you wanted to do was find the water jug. I'll admit I haven't been thirsty like that in a long time from a natural standpoint. And thankfully, I've never been anywhere close to dying of thirst naturally. But there have been a few times in my life that I thought I might die from thirst spiritually. That my soul was so thirsty that I wasn't sure I was going to survive. And there is nothing any more glorious. There's no greater relief in the world than for God to keep his promise that I will pour water. I will pour water upon him. See, he wasn't just going to give you a sip. He's going to drown you in it. I will pour water on him that is thirsty, and floods upon the dry ground. I will pour my spirit upon thy seed, and my blessing upon thine offspring. As we go forth into this new year that we've counted, may we be blessed more and more every day to keep in our view the new thing that God does in our lives, the new grace, the new mercy. See, that's something else. You've got scriptural authority to talk about new mercy, because the Bible teaches us that his mercy is new, not just every year, but every morning. I've said it before, God don't give you leftovers. God don't give you warmed over stuff. It's fresh, and it's new, and it's given with purpose from his great storehouse of love. So as we step into this new year, we will do so with joy for the new thing that God does, for his promise that even when we stumble, that he's still God, and that we are still recipients of his mercy, and that when we thirst, his promise is that he is going to relieve that. So may we always be thirsty for the things of God. You know, Jesus even said that in his Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst. We often think that, you know, the filling part is where the blessing is. And there's satisfaction in that. But what Jesus said was, we are blessed when we hunger and thirst. You see, it's a blessing to need water. It's a blessing to be hungry. You ever notice when you're hungry, it don't take a whole lot of time to figure out what you want to eat, does it? You're not too hard to suit. If you're not hungry, then nothing tastes good, does it? I think sometimes that's one of the reasons we have such a hard time figuring out where we're gonna go eat, because, no, we're not really hungry, we're just, you know, it's just time to eat. But what a blessing that is. To have to take a little time to think about what we're hungry for. May we find that more and more we're hungry in this new year for the things of God. May God bless and keep you is my prayer.